Hi, everyone. I'm Karina Kimball. I'm Special Ed Instructional Coordinator.
And hi, I'm Stephanie Campbell. I'm one of the secondary math TOSAs. Today, Karina and I will be taking you through how we co-planned an 8th grade lesson with illustrative math. The lesson focuses on inputs and outputs of functions. It's from Unit 5, Lesson 1. So it's our students' first experience with this. I will be coming with the content knowledge, and Karina will be coming with
the access knowledge. So we're going to look at a scenario where our students have different abilities and how we plan a lesson together. We first looked at the warm-up, and you can see in this warm-up that there's division, multiplication, some use of exponents. We decided in this scenario that some of our students with math disabilities or difficulties don't know how to divide and might not even know what division means. So that's the lens we were looking at this lesson through. We know that there's a variety of different abilities when it comes to students in their math learning, but this is what we decided for this one. So when looking at our planning, we decided to do a few different things. First, the teaching notes say that we're going to arrange students in groups of 2. We decided to strategically group our students. You have a few different options when doing this. And I noticed when looking through this lesson specifically, and I think this goes for illustrative math in general, that you're really going to use that strategic grouping in a variety of ways. You might have them where they're leveled groups. So all of our students in one skill set are here, another skill set are here. And what we decided to do for this warm-up is to strategically group them in a heterogeneous way where we have students that are below grade level, on grade level, and above kind of mixed together. So the multiplication charts, I thought, would be a really good way for students that were having difficulties to access this warm-up. And so I asked Stephanie, hey, what do you think about the multiplication charts? She said, I think it's great for those specific students for sure, and also available for everyone. Do you want to expand on that?
Yes. So I looked at, using the teacher notes, I looked at the standard that was elevated for this warm up in this lesson, and it focused on the inputs and outputs of functions. It didn't discuss anywhere division explicitly or multiplication explicitly. And so because of that, providing a multiplication chart or even a calculator would not lower the level of the rigor of the standard. It's an accessible item for all students.
We also wanted to make sure that our students got 1 minute of think time. So in the notes, it has that everybody gets 1 minute of quiet think time. Stephanie really said this is going to be important for all students to get. So when we're giving this lesson, we'll make sure that's in there. The other thing is that we want to get to the synthesis of this warm-up because that's where potential explicit instruction might happen, right? We're getting information from all students. Some students might have gotten it, which is great. We can elevate that with more explicit instruction. And if none of the students got it, then we'll just kind of get to the point so we can move on. Lastly, on the warm-up, when we're talking about multiplication charts, we thought, is there a way that we could utilize these for our students that are gifted and talented or above grade level? And we thought as an extension, we might be able to say, how would you prove your answer using that multiplication chart? We went on to decide on an activity. For this one, we chose activity 2. And so here's kind of a little bit about it. I do just want to emphasize that the teacher notes on the side where our 3 arrows are really gave us a lot of information when looking at planning, especially myself that I'm not familiar with the illustrative math with the platform or really even with the content. That really helped me figure out, oh, okay, this is what we're doing and how we're going to do it. So again, we decided we would strategically group our students. We decided heterogeneous here as well would be the best to move forward with. On the left side of your screen, you have the rule cards A and C. These are 2 of the 4 rule cards that are available in this activity. You can see the A is add 7, C is a little bit more, you double, then subtract. It's a 2-step thing. It's 2-step rule. What we thought is we have students with specific skills let's make sure that we have cards that are based on those skills. So maybe it's addition, maybe it's subtraction. With the multiplication chart, maybe they're able to do that. The actual rule itself could be skill based. If we're going to do that, we also want to assure that the students get the specific cards that they need, right? So whether that be us separating them between the two students or a few students, here are the ones you're going to give, here are the ones you're going to give. We would go like that. I guess there's only 2 players, so that would actually work out real well. And then the other thing I thought of when we were looking at this side is here are the different student responses, x plus 7, 2x, I think that is, a 3x. I was not correlating add 7 to x plus 7. I would not have made that connection. So I can't imagine our students that have disabilities or struggles in math would have either. So we thought we could write that answer on the card. So on the add 7, we would just write x plus 7. So then the player that had that card would know exactly what they were looking for as far as the student response. Lastly, I thought we have the student responses. Let's create a word bank of answers for students. When I brought this up to Stephanie, you go ahead when we talked about the word bank.
So the word bank was something where I thought only specific students would have access to it, because given we're focusing on inputs and outputs of functions, and the word bank would explicitly list either the input or the output of the function, that would then be lowering the rigor of the grade level standard for students. And so for all students, if all students had access to it, so only specific students that Karina and I would discuss based on her caseload and who's in my class would have access to that as needed.
And then the last piece for this was that there is a monitoring sheet. So as the students are doing this activity, there was a monitoring sheet, and we wanted to make sure that both teachers had that sheet. Do you want to mention anything about the monitoring sheet?
So for those that have more of a math content knowledge, the monitoring sheet focuses on the 5 practices, which illustrative math sometimes calls the anticipate, monitor, select, and sequence math practice, or excuse me, math language routine that's elevated in there. So this lesson in the teacher's notes called that out. So Karina and I would make sure that we each had a copy of that. So as we're walking around and monitoring students, we could each take our own notes on that before we discuss.
Right. And so that would really give us both responsibility during this time. And we'd also both be able to see, oh, here are the students that are getting it, and here are the students that aren't. So having that as a dual responsibility during that time, we thought was really advantageous. So one thing that I really noticed when looking at illustrative math is that we wanted to really be clear and make sure that we get to the synthesis piece of both the activity and the lesson. There's what I would consider a myth out there about illustrative math around explicit instruction, and that illustrative math doesn't have explicit instruction. And that was my belief for a long time, and I have since realized that, they actually do have it, but you have to get there, 1. And 2, it might come from other students' work. Other students might get it and be able to exemplify that explicit instruction, and that's great. That's really what we want students to do, right? But if we don't get to the synthesis, it can be difficult. So making sure that we get there is important. And then when we're looking at this specific activity, using the teacher notes, we looked at how can we support students' language during this time? Because they're being very verbal. What is an example? Where in the activity was the rule? Supporting students by allowing them to have that rule card as a discussion piece, or also as a visual that they could point to, like, oh, here's the rule, here's the output, would really be beneficial. And because we're inviting some of the classmates to share in the strategy, we're looking for those that get it and that we can pull that explicit instruction from. And so we would both use those monitoring sheets to identify that. And apparently in column 1 is where the students are. So we would both be looking at that. We would come together, decide who we were going to have to share that.
Yep.
Another piece that I wasn't familiar with is that there are 2 syntheses within a lesson. There's the activity synthesis and then the lesson synthesis. So looking at the lesson synthesis, we kind of went bullet by bullet and decided how are we going to make this accessible to everyone and making sure that everyone understands what we've just done. So there were a few things that we decided that if we needed to, we could use that explicit instruction piece on bullet 1, whether it be from other students or from ourselves. We might make some anchor charts to show the tables and give examples if we needed to. Similarly, with bullet 2, we would be doing the same thing. And then with the last one, Stephanie, what do we have to do on that one?
So the last question in the lesson synthesis connected back to work that was done on activity 3. However, in our 50-minute class period, there is not enough time to get through 2 activities. So we made the decision when we came together to skip that activity. So in order for our students, all students, to have context and understanding, we would need to put the rules from activity 3 on the whiteboard and do some additional explicit instruction so that they know what input and output pairs are in the context of figuring out a rule for this.
Yeah. So the last piece is the cool down. And again, the cool down, similar to the synthesis, is super important. And the reason for that is because this is where it gives us a response to student thinking. So throughout the entire lesson, we're moving along, we're making sure students understand. Here's where we're going to see how they really understand or not. So a few things that we wanted to do is we wanted to do this in paper form. We thought for us it would be the easiest, so we just made a note that we want to make copies on it. And then I thought if we're able to use this table that we have here and this first equation where we have the input, the rule, and the output, it might be beneficial for students that are struggling to have those labeled. So we have the input labeled, the rule labeled, and the output labeled. This is the first time that a student might be seeing something like this, and it might not be as intuitive for all students as it might be for some. So when I brought that up to Stephanie, go ahead.
I thought that was something that only certain students should have access to. And this, I feel like a broken record, but it goes back to the standard. And also over here on the right-hand side where we have our arrow, this cool down has more chances throughout the curriculum and throughout this unit. So this is just kind of dip your toe in the water to see if your students have understanding or not. So it's okay if students, the majority of my students, don't understand how the input, rule, and output function. But for my students that need additional supports or additional access, it levels the playing field for them.
Absolutely. The other thing that we just thought of is that if we need to give a specific example for students on an individual or small group basis, that would again be best for specific students, which I thought made complete sense. And then lastly, Stephanie mentioned it, the response to student thinking. For this one, it's simply give more chances. And knowing that this is the first lesson of the first unit, that would make complete sense, right? Because it's the first time they've seen it. It's okay. This is a spiraling curriculum. We're going to come back to it. But it would also make me feel better as a special education teacher, and I'm sure Stephanie as well, that, oh, okay, there are going to be more chances. Our students are going to get this again. And it could even be in our mind that we want to make sure that they do. I don't have any doubt that illustrative math isn't lying to us, but we just can know for ourselves that that's where we want to go with that. And then sometimes there are other options. Is that right, Steph?
Yes, there's 3. There's more chances I'm forgetting what the middle one is, where you're starting to develop understanding, and then the last one is press pause. And the press pause guidance is usually more of students should have mastery by then, and if they don't, it tells you what to do with it.
And so when we're planning, we would take a look at what that is and be intentional about our planning from there. This did not require a lot of more intentional planning because it was going to be involved in the other pieces. But the other two sound like we would need to decide how we were going to fit that in. Is it going to be during a specific time in a specific lesson? And we would make sure that that works. So we really appreciate your time today. And this most likely will be given to you by your coaches. You may be seeing this in a Schoology course. We're looking forward to working with you all and looking forward to working through illustrative math with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.